Welcome everybody. Welcome to this joint webinar of TBM Council and BIAN, the Bank Industry Architectural Network. My name is Hans Tesselaar, the Executive Director of BIAN, and I will be the host and I will guide you to the day. So we have the webinar, and then we at the end there will be an option for a Q&A, but you will see it when we get there. If you have any questions in between, please use the Q&A button that you will find in the bar, say on the bottom of the screen. So, okay, Nikita, can you maybe go to the next slide? So, as usual, we have a lot of participants from all around the globe, and we highly appreciate it due to all the different time zones. So for some people it's early morning, for other people it's late at night, and for some, like me in Europe, it's the end of the afternoon. So I think I'm extremely privileged with this time slot. So on the next slide, you will see who will be participating today. So Hans Tesselaar, so that's me, the Executive Director of BIAN, and maybe Justin, you can introduce yourself, followed by Clarion.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Hans. So Justin Mann, I currently have the opportunity to step into my dream job, heading up the standards research and also the education and training for TBM Council. Prior to that, I wrote the book on operating IT as a services organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about the work I'm driving here at TBM Council, but for now, I'll simply say a lot of it involves connecting with and enabling practitioners and execs out there like Clarion Fernandez.
Okay, Clarion.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you, Hans. Thanks for having me here. I'm Clarion Fernandez. I'm an executive director at Nomura, a Japanese financial services company. I'm based out of New York currently, after having traveled the world for the past decade or so. I look after the technology business management function at Nomura, and at TBM Council, I'm the co-chair of the banking strategy community, where a lot of like-minded individuals from the banking community come together. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we do there in just a while.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Nikita. So what we are discussing today, and was already a little bit revealed by Clarion, is to see, okay, how we can leverage the two standards, let's say, jointly. So for BIAN, we have our service domains, and that is BIAN lingo for elemental business functions. And if you will see that you can also then, okay, how can you then leverage those standardized functions with their value streams and the processes in the whole of the TBM framework. So we have the introduction, the session outline, the benefits, of course, of BIAN, and then we end up with the Q&A. Okay, we go to the next slide. So the introduction to BIAN. So on the next slide, you will see what the mission statement of BIAN is. So our mission statement is, and I think it's good to underline that we are a not-for-profit association, so we don't sell anything, and we are global. So we have our members and users all around the globe. We started in 2008, and the underlying idea of everything we do is to solve the integration issues for the bank. And solving the integration issues was in the early days. How do I add additional functionality to my existing IT environment? Then it became external integration, APIs, fintechs, how do the bank interacts with ATMs, with their own homepage, and so on and so forth. So we cannot do that alone. We are a small organization, so we need our members. It's similar like TBM Council. So the members help us to create the content. So we have a whole ecosystem of leading banks, technology provider, fintechs, and so on and so forth. So it's always an option when we have a webinar to encourage people to take a look and maybe to join and to actively participate in what we do and, let's say, improve the business that we are in. Okay, on the next slide, we will see the model. So if you want to, or if your mission statement is that you need to solve the integration issue, then the first question we needed to ask is, okay, but what is there to integrate? So in 2008 and in 2025, there is no publicly available bank on a page model. So we created our what we call our service landscape. So what you see here are the 300 plus elemental business functions that should be in a bank that does everything for everybody. So that's our starting point, and everything else that we created is based out of this model. Okay, Nikita, we can go to the next. So here you see our current member base. So these are the financial institutions, and as you can see, it is from all around the globe. So Absa Bank is in South Africa, Wells Fargo is in the US, Waba Bank is in Kuwait, and VIB is in Vietnam, and everything in between. So on each continent, we do have our members, and that also implies that our model is, let's call it, implementable in every jurisdiction. On the next slide, you see the first part of our partner. So we cannot do it with the financial institutions alone. So the financial institutions know very well how to do banking, but the partners know how to automate and how to integrate and so on and so forth. So you see familiar names, Accenture, IBM, McKinsey, and you see less familiar names like Digital Challengers and company out of Mexico. On the next page, you see the remaining part because it didn't fit on one page. And on the following page, you will see our academic partners. So we have 4 academic partners on the top: Carnegie Mellon in the US, Singapore Management University in Singapore, IDRBT in India, and Competence Center Sourcing as part of the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And then below that, you see the standard bodies that are active in our community. And with all those, we have an agreement in place. So the agreement implies that we can use their materials and they can use our materials just to avoid that we are inventing wheels that already exist. Our primary focus is on ISO 20022, so we try to align as much as possible, and today it will be 90+% all our deliverables with ISO 20022. And on the bottom, we see 3 training partners. We also know that our models are not easy to digest, so there is a need of additional training outside of the membership training, and then we have 3 accredited training partners. So that is it for now. So Nikita, on the next slide, you will see, so I hand over to either Justin or to Claire.
Thanks so much, Hans. I'll take it from here for the next few minutes, and I'll start with just a very quick overview of TBM Council and some of our operations and membership. I want to keep this brief. You can always find out more of that type of detail on our website, tbmcouncil.org. But what I really want to do is spend about 10 minutes or so getting into the actual standards and practice of TBM, and in doing so, set up some very clear opportunities for connecting with both the TBM community with the BIAN community and standards, which Claren will take you into more detail on. So at its base, the thing to know is very similar to BIAN. TBM Council was founded as a nonprofit entity in 2012. The goal is to advance the discipline of technology business management. So Council is the governing body for a core set of TBM standards, including the framework, taxonomy, and some training and certification. So it's important to keep that kind of separation in mind, that there's the generic agnostic concept of TBM and the practice of TBM, and the TBM Council that acts as a connector for communities and standards. So we've got a large and growing global community. We'll go through that in the next few slides, but let's first, on this next slide, look at a little more detail on the mission. And our mission is really just to connect business, finance, and tech as disciplines. So we want to equip those 3 different domains with a single view of tech value, provide them the standards, training, and education. And that means helping these organizations who adopt TBM, scale, evolve their maturity of TBM, and in doing so, deliver better and better outcomes, moving from cost transparency to planning accuracy, risk management, sustainability, and innovation. So at its core, TBM is about making these connections between disciplines. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit of a look at our member base, which to date, it's a global community, a little over 20,000 members right now, spread across 4,000 member organizations. And interesting call out there is different from a lot of technology standards body, that member base does include around 1,700 CXOs. And that does include a mix of CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs, so the tech executives, as well as financial executives, the CFOs, and an increasing number of product operations and CEOs out there. So it also includes about 92 of the Fortune 100. And all of these members and organizations are using TBM to drive value, and it is working. So if you click to the next slide, what you're going to see is that the member base that's adopting TBM and using our standards and training are starting to achieve some really significant outcomes. You've got 89% that have reported a decrease in cost to serve customers. They're improving their CSAT to all-time highs. They've improved efficiency and performance. And even more telling for all of this is 88% of member organizations are telling us they are freeing up funding for more innovation. So we'll try to go into that here in just a few minutes. But on the next slide, some of the members who are achieving those outcomes, or I should say quite a few, are coming to us from the banking and financial services member base. So again, you can find more details and connect with these members and organizations through our communities. I understand there's always, detail behind this on, how many, how mature are these practices. Main thing is the engagement from banking and finance sector is not insignificant. In fact, I would say that sector for us tends to be one of the early pioneers, early adopters as TBM evolves. So very next slide, I'm just going to hit on a few last things, mainly about how we operate TBM. So we operate TBM loosely around 4 pillars. The main one that you would imagine to see here is the standards and best practices. So we're building standards like the taxonomy, doing research, qualitative and quantitative research, and designating these best practices. That in turn feeds education and career certifications. We're just in a phase here where we're completely relaunching an all-new catalog of training and career certifications, and even practice audits and assessments for organizations to go through. Another big pillar for us, though, is the collaboration and networking, and I'll throw events in there too. So lots and lots of activity around connecting different communities. We've got a yearly conference along with just tons and tons of events. And we host executive roundtables on a regular basis all over the globe. Same with practitioner meetups, coffee chats, and there's a whole set of strategy communities that I'll speak to you here in just a second. Lastly, just to call out, we are an open ecosystem. So we're constantly growing the partner ecosystem base and bringing in new partners that help deliver and advise on TBM, software vendors that give you the tools to practice TBM. And very quickly, Nikita, let's kind of wrap up this section with a look at the next slide and the different strategy communities that we have in flight. So these are persistent groups of people who come together, and they're typically organized around different domains like cloud or agile or strategic portfolio management or TBM adoption. But we also have a growing number of industry vertical specific strategy communities. Claren's going to take you through a little more detail and background of the banking strategy community in just a minute. But in the last few minutes I've got, I really just want to dig into what exactly TBM is. So Nikita, if you click to the very next slide, the first thing I want to just demystify for everyone is we've probably all heard the concept of we need to deliver value for the business through tech. We've heard that thrown around. What we've seen, and if we were presenting this in a longer form presentation, the content buildup here would drive home the point that a lot of times when our industry talks about value, they're only talking about one dimension of it. So they're looking at the cost, or they're only looking at the performance or something like that. And they're missing the point that value is multidimensional. So what we really need to do is manage value holistically. The other thing we need to do is manage value at scale and do it at all times. So here again, when we talk about value, or we throw out this idea that we're managing the value of tech, when you dig into that, a lot of times it's heavily centered on how we change the business. So historically, we've always had good controls, planning, and transparency into capital projects, architecture review boards, but 60-70% of the spend and the value creation comes from how you operate tech over time. And we historically have not had transparency into that. The other thing we need to do is to understand the trade-offs between these dimensions of value. So if you increase your risk posture, there's a very high chance that you're going to also increase your total cost of delivery and possibly even impact your customer experience. So what we need is some way to model these things in a single source of truth and understand those trade-offs. We don't want to focus just on cost, but cost is always a key element of value. And we need to make sure we're looking at 100% of tech spend, not just IT costs, but also the tech cost out in the trading floors, the IoT sensors, things like that, and not just cloud. So cloud is obviously a big source of spend, but it's only 20-25% of spend. So we need to bridge all of these domains together. And another big call out I'm going to hit on is TBM is seeking to establish itself as an umbrella framework for the industry. When we talk about understanding these different dimensions of value, like risk, sustainability, performance, there's already standards out there and frameworks for understanding those. The last thing we want to do is compete with those or recreate the wheel. What we do instead is act as an umbrella framework and provide a way to connect those other standards together and understand the trade-offs. And lastly, a lot of the standards out there today that have positioned themselves as the value for tech really don't have relevance to the executive level. So the executives kind of understand the basics, but it's not giving them actual tools and levers. So that's the mission of TBM, to connect all of these dimensions of value, cost, performance, risk, and do that in a single model of truth so that we can start doing data-driven value management and do that at scale. So if you click to the next slide, you'll start to understand how we do that. Because when we talk about spanning all of these dimensions of value, the different disciplines of finance, tech, and business, that's overwhelming. That's a sprawling commitment. So it's easy to start to feel overwhelmed if you don't have some structure, or better yet, it's easy to make it feel like a sales pitch and abstract theory and not something that's practical. And that's where our new framework comes in. The framework is how you build a successful and sustainable TBM practice. So if you're ever lost in adoption or maturing your practice or how to deliver value, you can go back to the framework. I like to think of this in the terms of start with why, kind of like the TED Talk in the book. At the very top, we need to figure out what are the drivers of value that we're trying to impact. Is it the risk, the sustainability, the financial performance? Then we need to think through how. What outcomes are we going to deliver to impact those value drivers? So loosely, if we want to push on financial performance, the first thing we need to do is give transparency to the financials. From there, we can start adding insights like, are we trending up and down? Were we over budget, below budget? We can do benchmarking across industry peers and so on and so forth. But we can do the same thing if we want to push on sustainability. So we can give transparency to the carbon footprint for these solutions, resources, and cost, the water usage, the energy usage, and we can model all of these in a single source of truth. That brings me to the model that I'll go through in more a minute, but that's where TBM becomes real. And finally, if you understand the outcomes and the value you're trying to push on, the model you need to build, it will tell you what other standards you need to connect with, like FinOps or Agile. And from there, it helps you think through the data that you need to get access to, the types of tooling and automation that you need, and even the methods. Are you delivering via Agile, waterfall, or hybrid? What type of environment are you delivering through? And the stakeholders, and obviously because TBM is so expansive, change leadership is a critical. It is baked into everything we do. In the last minute or two, Nikita, I want to set up, if we were to click into the taxonomy picture right there, there's a lot of information about the taxonomy on our website, but if you click into it, you can imagine what this allows us to do, which is define a common set, like a shared view of all of these elements that everyone can agree on. We've got a common set of cost pools that can be mapped back to a chart of accounts, and as costs hit the general ledger, they feed into these. And then we've got a way to map those up to your resources. Is it labor? Is it compute? Is it storage? And then from there, we can bring those costs up to the solutions layer. And that's where you're actually delivering. What is the product or service you're actually delivering? What's being consumed by who? And that's where you manage the value. So what this can do, I'm going to be clear here, is you can take a really complex investment like zero trust architecture, and you can show a really defensible distillation of all of the costs going into the delivery and operation of that architecture, and defensively show who's consuming it, why it costs so much, and give that CISO that traceability all the way down into the solutions, the actual resources, labor, et cetera, that are being used, and into the actual cost pools. So we hear a lot of talk in the industry now about the value and the ROI of AI. I do enjoy reading those. What I'm setting up here is an opportunity to model the fully burdened costs of super complex AI solutions, trace that down into the actual cost drivers. Is it the data scientist? Is it the storage? Is it the data? And even plan out your capacity hits. And then from there, bring in metadata around the carbon footprints, the risk profiles, and capture all of that in a single model for that AI solution and start doing that real value management. So in the last few slides, we're going to start to set up Claren's piece here. The taxonomy is another value of the taxonomy is it gives us a floor. This is how we anchor other industry standards into a TBM model. So perfect example, we have right now in our community, we have like a 400 element mapping, bidirectional mapping from the NIST framework for cybersecurity into our taxonomy. So you can go into there and figure out how you connect cyber profile rankings from NIST, show those next to a TCO, and then show those trade-offs and how you're modeling the cost and consumption. So that's one call out, is these connected standards. What we typically do with these standards is start with some high level positioning, just some short papers or ebooks that set up the art of the possible, the value potential of connecting these standards, the value to TBM practices, but also the value of bringing TBM into these practices. And then from there, we do the real practice level work, along with any training, certification, practice audits, things like that. There's one final piece I want to share as we set up Claren on this, or two pieces really. If you click to the next slide, one thing we do a lot of times is our solutions layer, because it needs to reflect your actual product and service portfolio, we maintain and govern extensions for different industry verticals. You got a view there. Banking and financial services have been a long running extension that's been made available, and Claren and the strategy community for banking are constantly keeping a pulse on that and making sure it's updated and reflects the latest trends in that industry. And on the final slide, I do want to call out, we just introduced a brand new major revision to our taxonomy. There was a lot of things we did here, like elevating insights for public cloud, for AI cost modeling, things like that. But I would like to draw your attention to this topmost bucket. So in the previous slide, we showed how the business box in the solutions layer, how we expanded and provided extensions that designate common elements for the business solutions there. What we did with full intention in Taxonomy 5.0 is we split the consumer layer for business architecture between functions and capabilities and value streams. And that was done intentionally to support organizations that tend to kind of fit in either or. We've historically probably put too much focus on showing product TCOs and how those get consumed by business functions or lines of business. And then we ran into organizations who had very cross-functional processes, big Six Sigma heavy. And then obviously with the shift from project to product, it put more emphasis on value streams. So what we are setting up now with Claren's team doing a lot of the pioneering work here, and what I want to get on everyone's radar for this audience is we've designated this element in Taxonomy 5.0, and we're very much looking for connected standards bodies and practitioners and experts who can help us start building out industry vertical defined views of these value streams and figure out how to connect value use cases. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Claren to kind of springboard off of those three key setups. TBM looks for connected standards with different bodies like BIAN. We've got the value streams and the industry extensions. So last one, a couple of QR codes if you want to follow us on LinkedIn or join the community. And with that, I want to hand it over to Claren. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Justin. I'm always impressed when Justin speaks. I felt like I was part of the audience listening to this, although I knew what he was going to talk about. And I've been involved with the TBM Council for a little less than a decade, and I continue to be impressed by the work that the community does in pushing forward the discipline and the conversation around value management. So I have the pleasure of co-chairing the banking strategy community. Some of the names are listed here. It's chaired by a gentleman who's based out of London, and McGinnis, who's with the National Westminster Bank. And together we have a group of very interested individuals who are there to provide thought leadership. This community is not a tactical community which talks about, how do you implement it, how do you connect one data point to another. It's really about thinking about what really drives value or value conversations in the boardroom. That's our mission, right? How we take the standards and we transform the value decision making. The whole decision making process, in my opinion, has evolved from being data-driven decision making to becoming insights-driven decision making when you add context. But today, as we move forward to that context, we need to add purpose, and that lends itself to value-driven decision making. And I think that's where we're driving this conversation, and that's where our thinking is heading towards. So we have a number of participants there. The working group is still looking for persons who would like to join in and provide thought leadership and have challenging conversations to further, drive transformation within the banking industry. We'll move on to the next slide, Nikita. And so within this group, we talked about a key mission of advancing our conversation from the standard TBM taxonomy, evolving the banking extension to now surfacing the value chain, leveraging the taxonomy and the extension. So two key points that we want you to take away. Banking is an industry that's built on trust, and you all know this. I'm preaching to the converted. But the need for us to build trust into our systems, our processes, and the way we deliver value to our clients, the imperative in that has been exponential. And it's going to grow with the advent of AI and the implementation of AI, and clients and regulators demanding, how do we trust the decisions you're making that impact financial services today? We need to be able to surface the value chain and the decision making in the value chain to be able to show to our clients that we are indeed trustworthy. Technology makes up a huge part of our cost base in banking. It ranges 70 to 80%. If you're a digital bank, then 100% of your cost base is typically technology driven. What we need to now bring to the conversation is, besides your systems architecture, besides your enterprise architecture and your data architecture, is the economics of it all. When you spend $1 in technology, how does that dollar travel through the value chain, and does it really create the value you're looking for it to do before it reaches to the client? Value is created incrementally through the value chain, and we're going to look at how we see it from a TBM standpoint. Over to the next slide, Nikita. Justin touched on this already. TBM is the language of cost transparency. We've been using it to create a robust conversation within organizations, a translation between your chart of accounts, your technology jargon, and your business architecture, where finance will speak in terms of resource costs versus non-resource costs, or cost of occupancy or cost of vendors. And your tech leadership talking cost of data centers, cost of compute, cost of storage, and the business talking about, oh, but I'm interested in, if I'm a trading organization, I'm interested in the cost of settlements, or I'm interested in the cost of KYC as a business process. How do we bring this together? TBM, as Justin rightly pointed out, is that underpinning framework that brings a common language where each key stakeholder still retains their ability to look at their costs or their expenses through their lens, while allowing the business to have a common conversation and they understand each other better. Architecture is the bridge. Frameworks like BIAN then sit on top of this for an industry like ours to then really surface up the value chain, the value stream, and how a dollar spent in your cost pools travels through your IT services and surfaces value on through your business processes and over to your clients. This language has been in use now for over a decade, quite successfully, great success stories. If you go to the TBM Council site or reach out to one of us, and we'll be happy to share some of these with you. But it talks of how when groups like the business, finance, and technology come together and have a common conversation with a common language, it can truly be transformational. Nikita, to the next slide. So one of the things we did in the banking strategy community is to take the taxonomy and sit with a peer group to look at what matters to us in banking and how do we define this? How do we create a common language for us in banking? There are things that are unique to us that do not apply to other industries. And so we developed the TBM Taxonomy extension. It's not meant to be a straight lift and shift, although you could do that. It's meant to be a broad set of guidelines. The way you run your organizations and the way you have your unique products set up within your organizations for different markets and different products could be different. We don't expect anyone to expose their USP, of course, but bring together a common set of standards and understanding of what is defined as a banking product and where does it sit within that framework and how do you surface the cost and ROI discussions associated with it. We want to further this into the discussion around a value chain. So this is where we want to share with you our first view of banking value chains through our lens. Nikita, next one. So as you know, a value chain is a sequence of interdependent activities, processes within an organization that deliver services to stakeholders. And we're defining the value of the delivery on 4 dimensions: productivity, quality, time, and cost. So they need to be defect-free, as specified, as required by our clients, on time, and invoiced correctly. And what this means, at the right price point for our clients. It is more than just a collection of systems, right? We see when we do value stream mapping, we typically look at processes. We look at activities that people are doing. These are then facilitated by systems. They're stood up by systems. They're held up by systems and technology that require other technology services to help them stand up and forms the backbone of the value stream. Looking at it in terms of its total cost, or what we call the TCO, then becomes imperative to look at where there are bottlenecks on that value chain, and sometimes surface the conversation of maybe throwing money at more money at technology isn't going to create that much incremental value. How can we have that conversation unless we look at the entire value chain lens of this? Let's look at it in the form of an example. So we want to, in the interest of time, we'll go through a very quick example. Nikita, on the next slide. We took a broker-dealer example. And this is a trade execution, standard process of trade execution. We've not lifted this from BIAN. We've created this as a sample. You could take this, fit it into your organization and see what it means to you, and how it creates value. An important aspect to note here is in each step of that journey, of that value chain, we're talking about what value does that step create. So value is not created just at the end of the chain, it's created every step of that journey. And in every step, you invest, you build systems, you deploy people, you have processes, you have activities, and you have tech platforms that are sometimes unique underpinning them, that hold them up on the value chain. The traditional KPIs that you've used before have been system uptime. How much does it cost to run? What's the total cost of running the system? What's the latency? What's the success rate of matching? So on and so forth. With value-oriented KPIs, we want to change that language. We want to propose that when you look at it, we're not saying traditional KPIs are wrong, but an evolved version of it is, what's the percentage of success rate? What's the percentage of orders captured without errors, and what was the cost of doing that? And what will be the incremental cost to change that percentage by 1 percentage point? Will it create incremental value for our clients, incremental reputational value, incremental business? And is that ROI commensurate with the amount of money we put in? And you'd be able to surface this using the TBM lens on top of the value chain. I'm not going to dwell too much into every aspect of these KPIs, but I do want to call out things like the margin efficiency ratio, number of trades confirmed within SLA. You're probably already tracking this. You will be able to throw the economic lens on top of that. To improve that ratio, what's the ROI, and therefore what's the value you're going to get for the dollar spent? Moving on, what are some of the opportunities that could be surfaced? So there are structural opportunities, right? So you look at cost of your data center, you look at cost of compute, your servers, your storage. When you augment it with the value chain, you'd be able to have a more informed conversation about where these resources get deployed and how much value you're going to get out of it. There are strategic opportunities in the way you look at your KPIs, and not just measure what something costs, but also be able to look at why those costs really matter. Cost of resiliency, for example. Why do I need so many network connections? Why do I need an alternate data center? Those conversations are surfaced when you put in the value chain. Looked at it in isolation, it seems like a lot of money to be spending. You put the risk layer on top of it and the value chain, and it will surface the value you're creating for your clients by investing that amount of money. The management opportunity is to completely change the conversation. How much will investing money, more money in tech, create value? How much more value will it create when we invest money in tech? A 2 million upgrade of an OMS improves latency by 1 millisecond. With the value chain overlay, you can say, is that really valuable for me, for the business I'm doing? Or will that 2 million be better deployed elsewhere in the organization? Resources are limited. And the way we look at costs cannot just be unidirectional. You have to look at be able to redeploy the money to places that create most value. So what are the outcomes we're going to look at? Next slide. You link your technology investments to your client outcomes directly, not just to a technology strategy, but to a business strategy. You optimize the value chain by looking at where you're funneling money into, and it's creating a bit of a log jam, where throwing more money at it won't necessarily solve the problem. So optimize the value chain, not just from a process perspective, not just from a delivery standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint, right? How can I make it more economically efficient for me to do settlements or trade execution or loan origination or loan disbursement or credit card disbursements, and rebuild trust into banking and banking processes. Lend itself to more AI-based solutions when you have optimized value chains. and be able to automate or look for what we call a factor of automation within that value chain to say, I can deploy a solution here and automate it better than the way I do it today. Change the narrative in the boardroom. That's what our focus has been of why we want to deploy value chains, leveraging TBM. I've listed a couple of narrative shifts that have been experienced within the industry from our peer groups that talk about changing the conversation from saying, here's how much we spend on a capability versus here's the value we're getting out of the capability. An example you see from the CFO view, 10 million spend on auto management systems annually versus 98% optimal routing, preventing lost spreads. 25 million in lost spreads. That's the value conversation. One is a pure cost conversation. The other one is a value conversation, and that's where we want the board to change the way it looks at the cost of technology. So, in summary, on the next slide, TBM. Oh, I'm sorry, I seem to have missed a slide. So, how do you get started? My apologies. How do you get started? 3-step journey to get involved. Choose a value chain, start small, select a service that matters, that has visibility, that is a pain point that you want to go after. Map your outcomes, map your value outcomes, and establish the total cost of the value chain. Leveraging the framework, pair it with simple outcomes, KPIs, look at the evolved example of KPIs. We'll look to publish more samples of KPIs you can look across various value chains, and then expose insights to the point of decision making. So the decision making can be value oriented rather than cost oriented. And don't wait for the perfect model, right? Don't wait for all your data to be in place. Start small, like they say, fail fast, fail small, and then start to build a discipline, right? Sorry, in conclusion, next one. TBM provides you a framework for transparency. Extending it with a value chain just gives you the value creation perspective. They come together really well, seamlessly. The conversations we've been having within our peer group has already surfaced some really good use cases being discussed among organizations that may already be present here or represented in this webinar. And we're very excited for some of these to be put out there in the public domain. Unfortunately, I can't give you specific examples unless they're fully vetted and signed off by individual compliance teams, etc. As you know, in banking, that's one of our biggest challenges. But as soon as we get that, we're excited to put it out there and show you demonstrated examples of how blending TBM with the value chain created faster value-based decision-making, value-oriented decision-making for an enterprise. And that could mean different things to different enterprises. And the framework lends itself quite well to that. With that, conscious of time, I'm going to wrap up. I hope you found this session valuable. I'll hand back to Hans and maybe some Q&A.
Okay, well, thank you. So I think it's very enlightening. I also saw that in the meantime, a lot of the questions that are put in the Q&A are already answered by Justin and Nikita. So when we go to the next slide, I think just for those who say, okay, maybe the BIAN model is of some interest. I saw also a question. So what let's say the alignment is between the TBM model and the BIAN model. So what we are doing, and you saw it in my slide with all the elemental business functions, there's okay, this is what the bank needs to do and not how to do it. And we are in the process of creating the value change, and because we also have around 13 to 1400 sample process definitions in the model. So to combine that with the mechanics and the models as described by Claire and Justin, could give you a great starting point. So it's not our mission to give a clear insight in cost and value. but we think that we can provide, let's say, a very solid standardized foundation to do so. I think that is the difference and also the alignment between the two of our organizations. So yeah, as each organization, we also need to cover our running costs. So our membership fee you see here on this slide. So it depends a little bit on the size of your organization. There was also a question on let's say, TBM Council, is it a corporate membership or an individual membership? Yeah, we cannot allow individual memberships, and that all has to do with intellectual property rights, not our intellectual property rights, but the intellectual property rights that maybe would brought in the discussion. So therefore we decided to go only with organizations who can then take care of their intellectual property rights. It's an annual fee, it's a pro rata fee, and yeah, what you see between brackets and tops. So we set those fees in 2008. The board will never increase the fees, so that also limits me in my budget. So you're looking here at the 2008 price list. And I think the next slide, Nikita, is the request. Yeah, so sorry, I also forgot the slide like Claren did. So so we have our 2-day summit in Chicago in November, and it's to showcase what we are doing, to showcase what our partners are doing. But this edition is especially focused on demonstrating all the new tools that we make available. We know that the architecture models are not that easy to digest, so we are in the process to creating a whole set of AI-driven tools. We created ourselves to take a look at the landscape, compare APIs, generate new processes, and what we also try to do with a very limited set of our model is to see if we can generate executable code. So more or less small solutions. So it will be extremely exciting. So if you're around, feel free to join us. And I think now we get the Q&A slide, Nikita, if you would bring it forward. Yeah. So there is a Q&A button, and some of you already found the button. So please take a note. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A area. If you maybe think, okay, I need to think about it, please send them then to info@bian.org. What we will do, everybody who signed up, we will send the slides, we will send recording, and we will also send them all the Q&A. So maybe I go to Justin. Justin, you answered some of the questions. Is there maybe one or two you want to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, I think if I just kind of echo some of the questions that have come in or the themes that are coming in, you know, high level, how TBM Council typically sets up a partnership with someone like with another team like BIAN or Business Architecture Guild or others is first and foremost, we're really just looking for one or two practitioners on either side to see that value opportunity and reach out to us and work to nail down. It could be a 3 to 5 page paper report. We've got designers on our team and editors who can help put these into ebooks or infographics and just publishing some kind of high level top or middle of funnel type content. And by doing that, we test the industry interest, the community interest from both sides. And we can usually take that. And, you know, Hans, I think you mentioned it earlier where we typically will do like a like for like agreement, you know, contract to say, hey, you know, we're going to make some collaborative stuff, but the BIAN architecture is theirs, the TBM taxonomy is theirs. And that's all it is. There's no exchange of, you know, money or anything like that. It's a very easy partnership to set up and incredibly valuable to the communities. And obviously, once we set up the opportunity, the real work that makes it valuable is more intense and more of a commitment because then we have to do the actual practice level work, right? So when we did the NIST cybersecurity framework as a connected standard, that was man, that was months and months of work. And what we actually had to do is make an increment to taxonomy 4 to make it easier to map 100% to, I think it was NIST v2. But that was, months and months of work to come up with the actual mappings and the guidance around how to use these things and map and then make use of those. So probably, I don't know, like a year or so after the initial like positioning was done. But yeah, those are always going to be just hugely valuable to the industry as a whole, but also to both communities because there's always this kind of neat cross pollination and collaboration between the communities. I know we've got multiple conferences, events. There's always opportunities to speak. Claren is always someone we're constantly turning to for his expertise in banking and value streams. But yeah, that's I know one question we had a few times. Let me see if there's any other that came in.
Well, I would like to reply. There was also a question about the relationship between TBM and the Business Architecture Guild.
Oh yeah.
Yes, so we also had a relationship with the Business Architecture Guild to see if we can work together with them to create, let's say, our capability map. I think, but I'm not sure that they changed their policy. So we, at the end of last year, we received an email that we are not allowed to publish all the materials that are based on the Business Architecture Guild materials. Otherwise, they would bring us to court. So I think, that's a little bit too much, to be quite honest. We also have a lot of volunteers working with the models, and you don't want to see them ending up in court. So we ended the relationship with the Business Architecture Guild for that reason, just not to have any risk. So it was a pity because it was already 3-4 years going, but then we need to abandon it. So I don't know why, from a standards body point of view. So we, and I think also TBM Forum, what we are striving for is adoption. So we would like to see people using it and not becoming millionaires out of it. That's a completely different starting point. So so that's just my reflection on that question. It's also a little bit, as you can hear, a little bit of frustration in it.
I can imagine. I appreciate that background. I would like to follow up with you and some of the audience to see if maybe we can't revisit that and dig into it and evaluate. It feels like there's a huge opportunity for like a three-way partnership. That, and we've certainly worked with some other standards bodies who have some very nuanced concerns about how their content, and it's always fair, but I think I'll just say, adding TBM to architecture is just a huge opportunity. I'll never forget, like a CIO was like, I get that you're drawing a line from this box to the box to this other box, but that doesn't tell me the value. That's not telling me that. So you can literally layer in TBM into an enterprise architecture or business architecture model, and now you get all of that. So we've been talking to the open group. I got to be honest, I really like some of their stuff, but their EA felt maybe overkill. And then we had Lean IX was kind of in the tent for a bit. So it feels like a slam dunk opportunity. And I will say, I did an engagement in Minneapolis one time, and I ran into a lot of Business Architecture Guild, and they showed me the content, and it just made sense. It made perfect sense. So if I had my preferences, I would love to follow up with you, Hans, some of the audience, and see if we can't make that connection. Feels like a huge opportunity.
Okay. Well, I think we are at the top of the hour. So I would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank Justin and Claren for answering all the questions, and of course explaining the value of what we are doing. And I would thank Nikita for moving the slides. Also very important there, because otherwise we were looking at the same picture for 1 hour. So that's also good. And of course, I would like to thank the audience for staying with us. asking the questions. And as stated, everybody who signed up will get the recording, will get the slides, and will get the answers. So again, thank you very much. Keep an eye on both websites to see what the next webinar or meetings will be. And we hope we raised your attention, and we are looking forward to meet you next time. Again, everybody, thank you very much, and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.